Hi everyone, my name is Leslie and welcome to my channel. In this space I talk about books that I'm reading and books that I want to read in the near future. I try to read relatively diversely in terms of authors but also in terms of genre, and so the main ones that I read are fantasy and literary fiction, but I'll also come here to chat about nonfiction, romance, horror, historical fiction, and science fiction, among other genres. So if that sounds good to you, then I hope you'll subscribe and stick around. Let's get to it. The Women's Prize longlist is like literally my favorite day of the entire bookish year. I don't think I enjoy any other part of the process as much as I enjoy the day that they announced the long list. I thought I would just try my hand at putting some suggestions out there, if you will, about what books I think could potentially be on the long list. When I went about making this list, I ended up choosing 20 books, and I know that the Women's Prize, the long list is only 16 books, and I don't care. I decided that I was just going to pretty much use any book that I felt like had a decent chance of being on the list, any books that felt reminiscent to me of books that had been on lists in previous years or winners in previous years. Another great thing about having 20 books on my list is that more chances for me to be right. My confidence level in terms of how right I think I am is not like super high. If I don't get any, I would be astonished, but I don't know, we'll see. I'm hoping I get like one or two. That would be great. But like I said, the Women's Prize longlist is my absolute favorite book day of the year because I really like these prizes, not necessarily to see who the winner is. It exposes me to books that I hadn't heard of. With the Women's Prize in particular, every year at least one or two of the books that were on the long list end up being some of my favorite books of the year, and so it's a pretty predictable way for me to find books that I know I'm going to love, and it's introduced me to a ton of authors. So on the one hand, I don't really mind if I get a lot of this wrong and I get exposed to other things, but then, you know, there is the personal satisfaction of maybe I'll be right a little, perhaps. I split this into 3 different sections. The first section is 3 books that I have read. My second section of books is more like the obvious contenders for the prize. They're books that have had a lot of hype. A lot of people have been talking about them, especially recently. And then the third section of this video is going to be books that I just haven't seen as widely spoken about in different various bookish spaces. Don't come at me if one of my books in the hype section you've never heard of, or a book in my like not as hype section, you're like, Leslie, this is all over the place, what are you talking about? This is just my perception of how hype these books are or how much people are talking about them. I could be, you know, 100% wrong. And as I go through each of these books, I'm going to just tell you why I picked it for the list, but I'm probably not going to give like an extended synopsis or anything because a majority of these books I haven't read yet, and I didn't pick them necessarily because of the premise, but because of the author or their writing style. Eligible books are written by women in English and were published in the UK from April 1st, 2022 to March 31st, 2023. The rest of my criteria is just a whole lot of vibes. A whole lot of vibes based on, like I said, I've been following this prize since like 2015, 2016, somewhere around in there. So that's what I based a lot of this on. First one I've talked about recently actually, and that is Best of Friends by Kamila Shamsie. Now, she won the Women's Prize in 2018 for her previous book, Home Fire. This one is about 2 best friends who grew up together in Pakistan, and then they move to London as adolescents, and we kind of see their friendship growing over the years. I talked about it in a recent video, but I did choose this one because the topic seems very like Women's Prize-y. I mainly picked this because I did think it was well written, and it seems like a sort of topic that the Women's Prize tends to favor, and she has won the prize before. The next book that I picked that I have read is The Rabbit Hutch by Tess Gunty. This is a debut novel. I haven't talked about it yet on my channel, but I do keep finding myself thinking about this book. There are a few reasons I actually chose this one. So it won the National Book Award in 2022. Then this is also centered around a woman who she's living in this apartment complex, and you follow all these different characters who live around her, who are roommates with her. And there's just an incredible amount of tension in this book. It's one of those things where you know that something dramatic is going to happen. You just don't know exactly what it is. From page 1, you're worried about this character, you know, feeling like defensive of this main character the whole time. So I wouldn't be surprised if it were longlisted. The next book that I read that I think could be on the list is Nightcrawling by Leila Mottley. And this was on the Booker Prize last year. This is about a young girl in Oakland. Is it Oakland? I want to say it's Oakland. She ends up witnessing something horrible and develops this really troubling relationship to put it mildly, with police in her area. Like, you really feel a lot for these characters. Leila Mottley, I think, is the youngest person to have ever been nominated for a Booker Prize. I think she was like 19 when she wrote this book. I read this, late last year, I think, and I have a very vivid memory of the end of this book and like how emotional it was and how impactful it was. There does tend to be some overlap between the Booker Prize and the Women's Prize for Fiction here, and so that was one of my sources for books, but plus this book just got a ton of buzz. So that segues nicely into my next pick, which is After Sappho by Selby, Wynn, Schwartz. And this book was also longlisted for the Booker Prize last year, and that's the main reason I picked this. I haven't read this one yet. I'm really looking forward to it. It sounds like it's sort of a series of vignettes about different women writers. Part of the reason I'm so excited about the long list is because it then gets me to read things that I'm really looking forward to, but I just never find the time. Gives me a little bit of extra motivation. Next up in my Everybody is Talking About This section of this video, we have Lessons in Chemistry by Garmus, and I got this neat Waterstones edition last summer when it initially came out. I'm not sure if it's available anymore. This book, I mean, I don't even think I have to say anything about this book, so this is going to be pretty short. If you haven't heard of this book, you know, I know that I said maybe I could be wrong with my designation between hype and like not really hyped books. If you're interested in the Women's Prize and you have not heard of this book, I'm going to put that on you. You should look it up. Next up is Ali Smith's Companion. Was that? The next book I chose in my more hyped section is Ali Smith's companion piece. This is a follow-up to her seasonal quartet, which started coming out in was it 2016 or 2017? And I'll be honest, I haven't actually started that. I own all of them and they're all mismatched, which is fine. But Ali Smith has won the Women's Prize before. She won for How to Be Both in 2015. But I'm actually kind of surprised when I was doing research for this video. At the very least, I know that none of the other books in the seasonal quartet made the short list, which kind of surprises me. Maybe some of them have made the long list. I honestly can't remember. Their author who has previously been on the Women's Prize list is Elif Batuman. One of these days I'm gonna look up how to say her name. This is Either Or, and this is a follow-up from The Idiot, which was shortlisted in 2018. And I actually do have a review of The Idiot from before I quit making videos for a few years, so I will link that up above. I just remember The Idiot being really satirical and ironic and just really poking a lot of fun at itself, and so I got this as soon as it came out since it is a follow-up to that book. I just haven't got around to it. She has been shortlisted before, so I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up on the list again. Another one in the, I feel like we all agree that this is a strong contender to be on the list, is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. There's just been a lot of hype around this book. I read the Poisonwood Bible when I was in college and I absolutely loved it, but it's been quite a while since I have read that, and I've not read anything else that she's published since then, so I'm quite interested to see how I fare with her writing now, years later. Wouldn't be surprised if it's on a list. Another in the same vein as the Deborah Kingsolver is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Has gotten also a lot of hype. I believe it's about video game developers and sexism in the industry. I've heard that it's very emotional and in a sort of fraught kind of way, not necessarily in a positive way. I don't believe that she has ever been longlisted or shortlisted for the women's prize before. There's just a lot of hype for this one. Jennifer Egan's follow-up to a visit from the Goon Squad is the Candy House. She just seems like prize catnip to me, like easy, you know, she's low-hanging fruit when it comes to prizes, in my opinion. That's not to say she's not a good writer or anything. I just feel like she's one of those authors that you kind of expect to be on these kinds of lists. I have read A Visit from the Goon Squad, but it's been long enough that I don't feel comfortable actually talking about what I thought, because I don't think I really remember anything. But from what I can tell, this is a follow-up to that book. I don't know how closely it's supposed to follow. I suppose if it gets longlisted, then I'll read it sooner rather than later. Okay, we're coming to the end of my list of, obviously these ones could be on there. I have Maggie O'Farrell's The Marriage Portrait. She won for Hamnet in 2020. I would be surprised if she got shortlisted or won again. Obviously it's possible. Hilary Mantel won the Booker 2 times in a row, not 2 years in a row, but 2 times in a row. But I don't know. That I read Hamnet when it came out and I cried for a solid hour while I was reading that book. So I'm really looking forward to reading this. This is like a Waterstones edition. Oh yeah, see, look at this. Look how pretty that is. But yeah, I don't think anybody would be surprised if this ended up on the long list. My last book in the this seems pretty likely category is Shrines of Gaiety by Kate Atkinson. Kate Atkinson is just one of those authors that I've heard about before. I believe she has been on the list before. Yeah, so she has been on the list before for Life After Life, and I've actually never read anything by Kate Atkinson, even though I do have a couple of her books. One of those authors I feel like I would really like her writing, and from my limited perspective of the world, I haven't heard a ton about it, but I do feel like the fact that she has been shortlisted before makes her kind of likely. There are a few books on my hype list that I do not own in physical copy yet. The first one is just barely coming out, so it's on its way to me, but it is Birnam Wood by Eleanor Catton. Did she win the Booker Prize for the Luminaries? Again, I haven't read it yet. I feel like I would really like her writing, but that book is just everywhere right now. It's very, very buzzy. I have seen some mixed things about it, so I'm not 100% sold on this one making the list, but you know what? Might as well. Like I said, 20 books, more chances to win. The Spell of Good Things by Ayobami Adebayo. And she's a Nigerian author, and she was shortlisted for the prize in, I know The Power won that year. Oh, was she not shortlisted that year? Oh no, she was. In 2017, she was shortlisted for the prize for Stay With Me. I've heard really, really great things about that first. I believe Stay With Me was her debut novel, but I've heard really great things about that book, and people feeling like that was a very, very strong contender to have won in 2017, even though it didn't. I'm really curious to see what this newest book is going to be like, and then I'll go back and read her other one as well. And then the final book on my buzzy hype list is I Have Some Questions For You by Rebecca Makkai. This has been everywhere lately. Her first book, wait, was it her first book? Her previous book, I believe, was about the AIDS epidemic and had some really positive reception. And so people are really, really looking forward to this new one, as far as I can tell. I chose 6 books for this next, my battery is dying. I chose 6 books for the final section of my little list here. The first one is True Biz by Sara Novic, and Sara Novic wrote Girl at War, which came out, I want to say 2016, 2017, that era, and I adored that book. I loved it so much. It was really emotional and like rich and just really beautifully written. This is her most recent book about, all I know is that it's about kids at a deaf school, and Sara Novic is actually a deaf author, which is just good to know that she is writing like from that perspective. I thought Girl at War was so wonderful that I have high hopes for this, and that's partly why I haven't read it yet, is because I'm kind of one of those things where you have really high expectations and you get kind of nervous about what it's going to end up being like. I think it would be interesting if this book ended up on the long list. I think this next book might get my own personal award for like best cover out of all of these books. It's just, there's something so pleasing about this cover for The Book of Goose by Yi-Yun Lee, and she is a Chinese author. As far as I can tell, this book is about childhood friends. It's about a couple of girls, I believe, who grow up together. I'm too distracted by this cover. I don't know why it is so incredibly pleasing to me. Like the font, the color, like the shapes here, like the curves of the goose's neck, like it's just so pretty. I take it as a crime against me personally that Claire North has never been on the Women's Prize long list. So I chose Ithaca by Claire North. I know several years ago her book The 15 Lives of Harry August was making the rounds on BookTube, and it was a really great book. It reminded me a bit of The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell, maybe less intense with the world building aspect of it, but I've since read a couple of other books by Claire North, and I think that she is really slept on as an author, maybe because she is participating in this whole like Greek retelling thing that is going on lately that will get her a bit more attention. I want more people to read this author, and so it's on my list. The next book that I have chosen is When We Lost Our Heads by Heather O'Neill, and the reason I chose this, actually it was kind of random. I was looking through my physical bookshelves and I saw this and I remembered purchasing it last summer. Heather O'Neill has been both shortlisted and longlisted for the Women's Prize in the past for 2 other books, and so I picked this one up last year thinking surely somebody who has been on that list in the past is somebody that I would be interested in reading. Yeah, the reason though that I have this in my like less hype section is because I haven't really heard much about this book at all. Like I think I saw like one person say that they were anticipating its release. That's it. Like that's the only thing I've seen. Again, in my, you know, specific perspective of things of the bookish world, it just doesn't seem to be discussed that much. However, just like knowing her history with the prize, would not be surprised to see it on there. This next book that I have chosen in the time of our history is by Suzanne Pari, and she's an Iranian American author, and this was actually something that I picked up based on the cover, and again it's not one that I've heard people really talking about that much. It just came out in January of this year. This is a debut novel, I believe, but it's one of those like multi-generational sort of spanning novels. This is my sort of like out of left field. Yeah, I haven't heard a whole lot about this book, but it seems like the type of thing that the Women's Prize would be interested in featuring. Amy Tan blurbed it on the back, so that's a good sign. My very last book that I have chosen for my predictions is All This Could Be Different by Sarah Thankam Matthews, and she is an Indian American author. This book first came onto my radar because it was shortlisted for the National Book Award in 2022. It is eligible for the Women's Prize this year, and it sounds like one of those sort of like coming of age as a full-on adult sort of stories, like moving out of the home and kind of creating your own found family, you know, of friends as an adult. There are a lot of really good blurbs on the back of it. Lauren Groff, Suzanne Choi, Raven Leilani, Robert Jones Jr. Just a lot of good things have been said about this book. And I think it just barely made the cut in terms of publication date, if I remember correctly. So let me know what you think of any of those books potential for being on the long list. It's so hard to say. I don't know how many books they get to choose from. There's so much coming out constantly that it seems impossible to say, but then at the same time, there are so many authors who appear on the list, you know, repeatedly. If you look back through the long list and the short list since the prize's inception, there are authors who just, it seems like almost everything they publish gets put on this list. And so in a sense, it's like maybe a little bit like we kind of know what sort of thing they're going for, but we will see. Let me know what you think of any of these predictions. If there are any that you would include that I missed, and I will see you in the next video.